Hi, everyone. Welcome. Excited for this conversation. We're going to get started in a few minutes. But if you want to let us know in the chat where you all are calling in from, my guess is the majority of you will be from California. But I know we have some of our alumni all throughout the country. So please let us know in the chat where you're calling in from, and we're going to get started in just a little bit. I did have some announcements to make. So while we wait to get the conversation started, I'll introduce myself. I'm Diana Maya. I'm the Director of Programs at Hope. I oversee all of our flagship leadership development programs. I've been with the organization for 12 years. So I'm particularly really excited to have this conversation since I've been in the leadership development space for over a decade now, which sounds crazy because in my mind, I'm still very young. Um, Okay, so first housekeeping thing I wanted to share is Hope is actually in the process right now of recruiting for two leadership programs, the Hope Leadership Institute, which is our California statewide based um, advocacy and leadership training program. It's here in California, as I mentioned. We recruit women from throughout the state. That application is currently open and is due November 1st. The other programs that we are recruiting for is actually new. It's the regional, um, I think it's called the regional regional institutes and hubs. It's new, very new, as in this is the first cohort. So it's launching um, in a couple of weeks. And I'm going to drop Hope's website on here for you all to go and look for more information. But if you know any amazing women in the LA or San Diego area, that's the two hubs that are launching first. Please feel free to share that information. This conversation is going to be recorded, but you can put any questions you may have in the chat. Um, and then you can find the rest of the Hope Hours. This is our sixth and final one this year. And you can find the rest of them on our website as well. So I put that in the chat as well. But with that, I'm going to introduce Delia Garcia, who is going to be the author that we're talking with during this conversation. So we started the Hope Hour series with an author chat, Delia, and it was actually with Mike Madrid. I don't know if you're familiar with Mike Madrid, but
Yes.
I figured he's a political strategist, and he had a book that came out earlier this year. And so we wanted to close with another author chat. And because we're a leadership development organization, what better author than to have this conversation with you? I know we had a conversation with you earlier in the year in March here in LA, and we had a panel on women's leadership. But this conversation, we're going to dig a little deeper into your book. But I'll introduce Delia. She's an award-winning executive servant leader, author, social innovator, and influencer with 25 years of public service, nonprofit leadership experience, and advocating for economic security and development. Delia currently serves as the U.S. Department of Labor at the U.S. Department of Labor, sorry, as the Women's Bureau Administrator for South Central U.S. after serving as an equity lead in the Employment Training and Administration in Washington, D.C. She is a best-selling author on national women's leadership with her first book titled Latina Leadership Lessons. 50 Latinas Speak, which is the book we're going to be talking about today, and it was launched in spring of 2023. Quick plug, Helen Torres, Hope's CEO, is featured in the book as one of those 50 women. And then the first, Delia was also the first Latina elected to the state of Kansas legislature and the youngest female elected when she was elected in 2004. She made history again by becoming the first Latina cabinet secretary of labor in Kansas in 2019. And she's a small business owner and has received awards and accolades from a variety of different organizations across the country. So we're very excited to have this conversation with you, Delia. Welcome. Um, all right, so to get us started, I read a little bit about your bio, but I wanted you to tell us maybe a little bit about your own leadership journey, and then if there was anything in that journey that you felt inspired this book. I think it might be cutting out. Hi, Delia, can you hear me? Oh, I think she might have frozen. We're gonna give her a second. She's in Texas and there's a hurricane. Ah,
Okay, I'm not sure. Can you hear me now?
we can hear you. Yes.
I don't know what happened.
No worries, no worries. Always, even, years after COVID, the technical difficulties never seem to leave us. But if you want to share a little bit about, I was saying, if you want to share a little bit about your own leadership journey and what in that maybe inspired this book.
Yes, thank you. And thank you so much, Diana, and the whole Hope team. And then also my sister in the book, Helen Torres, on page 159, just saying. Yes, I got to be with y'all in March. So anytime Hope asks, I will do what y'all say. I am here in Texas. So that's why I say y'all a lot. But as far as my back journey, as Diana mentioned, I was born and raised in Kansas, and in 1977. So I'm one of five daughters, and second generation. So both my parents were, my mom's from South Texas, my father's from Western Kansas, and all my grandparents are in Mexico. And when I say all my grandparents, there is a little bit of a novela there. Who doesn't have a novela? But when my mother was 4 years old, she was stolen at the Texas border and taken to Kansas. So a lot of people are like, "How did y'all end up in Kansas?" And it's been a bit of a
Yep, Delia? Delia, can you hear me? Oh, no, I can't hear her. I can't hear you.
can
Ah, I hear you now.
you hear me now
Yeah, I can hear you now.
or no?
Yes, I can hear you.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Just when it was getting juicy. I'm
Yes.
joking. So, so being one of five daughters, I always joke about, growing up in a two-bedroom home with five, there's five daughters with one bathroom. I learned adversity and negotiating early on. And so that's something I like to always mention, growing up in a house full of five girls. Um, it was always important to um, see myself, strong women around me. So when I went to college, I joined, well, actually, a Latina sorority did not exist on my campus in Kansas. So we chartered Kappa Delta Chi Latina Service Sorority. So we are not the traditional, we are a service sorority. And so again, that leadership development piece was always there in college. Fast forward in my adult life career, the National Hispana Leadership Institute was again another piece of leadership development. And that's actually where I met Helen during my time. And I was a state legislator at the time. And then now, with the state rep, I I co-founded the Latina State Legislative State Rep in the country. At the time we did this in 2009, there were only 72 of us in the country. Obviously, there's more now thanks to work like Hope. And so what we do is we make sure that when these Latinas are elected, that they're not hanged to dry. That we continue training them up and getting ready to run for Congress and lieutenant governors and governors. And we've had some of those runs. We're continuing to do that at the state legislative level. So that's something I'm excited about. So I've clearly been in that space of public service. And obviously now I'm still in public service, but a federal employee at the United States Department of Labor. So writing a book was not something that I was used to. But I will say I did this during the pandemic,
Mhm.
and part of this was I was watching TV just like all of you, and how this country was. It seemed at some point sometimes falling apart, and leadership and sometimes lack thereof. Uh, we did see women leaders. You weren't seeing many with colored faces, much like us. So I thought, there are amazing women I know, and I know we're going to talk about something later on in the interview about things I wish I would have included, but
David, I think we're having some issues with your connection. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. I think it's Delia that's having technical difficulties.
Text her.
okay. I am back, and I hope that is the last time. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. I don't see you. Give me a there you are.
I just switched over to my hotspot, so
Okay.
hopefully this doesn't happen.
Okay. Well, yeah, we'll
Okay,
make it work.
there you go.
All
Sorry
right.
about that.
No worries, no worries. I think you were saying that you'll tell us a little bit about what you wish you would have included and how this book came about during the pandemic.
Yeah, so obviously I wish I could have included more Latinas. I know more than 50 Latinas. And so I think that that's one piece. When I was writing it, I like I said, I've never written a book in my life. So this was, first run around. And I thought about, well, maybe I should do 500. And so when I started talking to other authors, they're like, it's going to take you forever. And I was like, I don't know when this pandemic's going to end. I don't know if I'm going to die. That's horrible to say, but like,
No.
you know, I want to be the time of essence. So let me just get this first volume out. And so that's what we did. So, but I'm excited to have, ever since we launched last year, of what it has now taken a life of its own and what other new things are coming of it.
Mm,
In particular, having these, chingona charlas across the country, and then, doing other activities like upcoming some podcasts we've done, and then also some executive coaching. So I'll talk more about that at the end, but that is sort of the developments I had. Life happens, and my father passed away in May, and so the summer's been a little bumpy. So we've put the book on hold until now. So I want to thank you for this opportunity for bringing it back to life again.
oh, thank you. Um, it's interesting that you say that you got the inspiration a little bit from COVID because actually at that time and it had been in the works for a while, but I think something um around not just COVID, but the prior years, it felt like this vacuum of or this void of Latina leadership at the national level. But having been doing this for so long, the organization, we know there's so many amazing Latina leaders, and so that actually is one of the things that inspired the Binational Fellowship is how do we prepare Latinas for national service. And so I love that we weren't the only ones who noticed, and then you're doing your work in states like Kansas and Texas to work with that. So you talked a little bit about what the process of writing the book was like. How did you just narrow down the list from 500 to 50 Latinas?
Yeah, that was really tough. And I will say the book does have three generations in it and 25 states represented. And it really was, when I was reaching out to many of the women, the people who were responding, pretty quick. When I did find a publisher, one of the things I have to say, for those of you who are interested in writing a book, because I hope you do, we don't tell enough of our stories. And again, another reason why I wrote the book, because I wanted the book to be serve as like a mirror. Like I want to see myself. I want my nieces to see themselves and what's possibilities. But it was really, some of these conversations. I wish I could write a book about writing the book, because that was not only therapeutic. When I would call some of the women and said, "Hey, I need your list," you know, for example, one of them, she's a United States, well, she was at the time, ambassador, and she's like, "Ay, hermana, I'm not sure, if I qualify." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And many of us don't see what others see, all right? And then some of these conversations would end in tears. And again, just at the time, life was happening, so we were able to pause and slow down a little to see like what was important, and this definitely was. And sharing and uplifting leadership stories to grow leaders. Again, back to the purpose of the book. But when I did reach out to, one of the main Chingona authors, Sandra Cisneros, I had said, "How do I start writing a book? I've never done it in my life." And she just kept saying, "Just write, just write." And then I was told by other authors, like, it's going to take 2 or 3 years. So, don't worry about, doing it in time. Well, a miracle happened. I reached out to 5 different publishers, and the Big Mama is the one who responded to me, which is my publisher, Arte Publico, which is the largest Latino one in the country, out of Houston, Texas. And so when I got the phone call back, things started moving, and so we had to start moving. So putting the list down to about 50, it was tough, but again, it was a start. And I have to say, without getting choked up, 2 of the women have passed away in the book, and one of them is in your backyard, there in California, Gloria Molina, who served as one of my mentors. Actually, an inspiration. When I was 15 years old, I saw her as a Latina elected, for one of the first there in LA, and I was, a teenager, and I saw myself in her, like, wow, a possibility, like I could be elected. And then immediately I was like, no, I can't, because she's in California, I'm in Kansas. It will never happen in Kansas. Little did I know that it was going to be me in 2004. But I say that I'm glad we wrote the book when we did, because she was able to see the book right before she passed, a month before she passed. And the young lady, my former intern, who was one of the farm worker families that I worked with in DC, there was a drunk driver's situation, and she passed a week before we launched the book. And she was ready to go in Michigan to do our first book signing there, and we still did it around her funeral, or the wake. But again, it's always, there's never the perfect time to write it. So to get started, I'm glad we got started and continue building and sharing their stories and leadership lessons.
Yeah. Wow, thank you for sharing that. I don't know that I got to meet Gloria Molina, but it's one of those stories of like, even yes, it happened in California and there's more Latinas here, but the way she ran for office and took on this like, boys club is it's a pretty remarkable story. So I'm glad that she was able to see it and be a part of this book. I wanted to share in the foreword, that is written by Dolores Huerta, which is just, one of the beacons of our community, not just here in California, but for Latinas everywhere. In the forward, it says that when we act, there's this piece that I really like. So when we act in service and gratitude, we impact our world more than we could have ever imagined. When we witness our impacts, the world becomes more beautiful, especially for um, those we love. And I think it just speaks to at least all the women that I've trained in the last, decade. They all come from this place of service,
Yes.
For their community, for their families. And so, is that a trend you saw in the book of all the women you interviewed?
I'm so glad you said that, Diane, because that is what sets us apart. I've talked to audiences that are not non-Latino, right? And they're like, "What's the difference?" And the difference that I like to brag about, and research does show, women of color, particularly speaking to Latinas, that we have this natural, right now people are paying thousands of dollars to get training of EI. EI is emotional intelligence, and emotional intelligence is is natural for us Latinas. We feel and service with our heart, mind, and soul, where some people have to learn that. And so when we already have that ingrained in our DNA, public service is natural. And so, it just makes sense to do, making sure that we're training our leaders, whether it's through a book or the training with hope. One of the things that I love about the book is it's just another tool to support and partner with organizations like Hope. It was never to recreate any wheel. It's to support. How do we keep doing that? How do we show that women and Latinas in Nebraska are doing amazing things and can do that, in the middle of the country, just like, where the strengths are, like in Los Angeles and in South Texas. But yeah, service has always been what I've grown up seeing, like mentors like Dolores Huerta. It's just amazing to hear. And again, I wish this book could be thicker, because all the stories that I've learned from the slumber parties we've had, and from my houses in DC to Texas to Kansas, of the richness that I wish those juicy details could be put. But having these chingona charlas are like the opportunity to do that, and these conversations now.
Thank you for sharing that. Can you share what is maybe one of the most valuable lessons or interviews in the book? And I know it's going to be difficult to choose one. It's like choosing, I'm sure, like choosing a baby or something. But maybe for someone who's like starting off in their career, and I know you mentioned that you interviewed 3 generations of women, but and I think some of the young women that you interviewed had some really uh salient advice. But what's maybe one of the ones that kind of sticks with you for young folks?
Well, I thought it was appropriate, because it was actually one, and I'll talk about in a second, like some of the common ones. But I really loved what Helen said. And like I said, hers is on page 161, and it's her number 3. And she talks about being purposeful. And that time is of the essence. And so making sure we maximize our time. Her said, if you believe in yourself, you make time to invest in your future and the future of our community by having a plan that leads you to your goals. Time is the most precious gift that we have. So being purposeful ensures you to not waste it. If there's anything that I've learned in my 47 years of life, from learning from the Dolores Huerta stories, from learning to Eva, who passed away at the age of her young 20s, is maximizing time on this earth, and what service we can do, and the God-given skills, gifts that God gave us to be able to give back to our community, whether it be through service or whatever that skill is, whether it be, the book has doctors in it. Dr. Mancias, she delivers babies, and she's also now a professor to teach other women, or just in general people of color, but in Kansas, to do the same thing, to be doctors. And so various people in various walks of their lives of doing that. But I think that was one that definitely stood out, and Helen said it very well, that sort of emulates what some of the other ladies said.
Yeah. And you mentioned it a little bit in your intro, because you opened the book with like this JFK moment that I was like, oh, that I wasn't expecting that question. I think you asked like, what was I put on this earth for? And it's really about like, what is your purpose?
Yes.
When did you, as as the leader that you are, when did you feel like you found your purpose?
I loved that question, because writing the book, I wanted to make sure that we were supporting the transformation of like our Latina leaders that we have now, and honoring the ones we've had in the past, and creating the future ones, right? But I will say I can remember the month and the year, March 30, 31st. It was 12:47 in the morning. That's why, of 2005. It was my first legislative session when I was elected in 2004. So 3 months into being a new state rep, there was a bill on the House floor, and we were it was the budget bill, and so we were debating the budget. And one of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle was like, I have an amendment to repeal, so undo in-state tuition, which, thank you, y'all, California had it before we did. And so it was law in 2004, and so this is now 2005, a few months later after it became law. And it was that moment, that evening, that I knew that my presence in those House chambers mattered. Because once the amendment went up, you can buy time by having the clerk read line by line. and you create a quick plan. And so the House Minority leader turns around, he's like, snaps his fingers, say, "Hey Garcia, you got this," as if I know every immigration thing, and I'm not even an attorney. So fast forward, I call MALDEF, the Mexican American Legal Education Defense Fund, attorneys who are amazing. 12:47 in the morning, she picks up. I woke her up in the middle of the night, and I was like, "Hey, Marisol, this is Delia. I'm talking really fast. There's an amendment. I'm going to read it to you. Can you please help me? I need to go to the microphone and defeat this." So I read it to her. I'm writing scribble. I get to the microphone. People are like, "Okay, this Latina's ready to speak." The media was there. You could hear a pin drop when I stepped up to the microphone. I step up to the microphone. I'm facing the chambers, the Republicans and Democrats on this side, the media's to the left. And I remember looking at my scribble, and I was like, "What the hell? I can't read some of this." I start reading some of the, points of the economic impact, blah, blah, blah. And then I close with saying, please join me in voting down this amendment. We don't want to impact bad, the economy in Kansas, nor do we want to rip families apart. And so I get through that without even crying. And that was I felt like my ancestors were up in the gallery that evening. I go back to my seat. My colleague's crying. She's like, "That was a great speech." I'm like, "Don't talk to me. Don't touch me. I'm going to lose my caca." One more speaker goes up after me, and then it's the final vote. And the final vote is green, red, on the scoreboard. And if it's a tie, the amendment dies. And it looked like it was close. And the final vote was 63 to 48. So we killed it by 5 votes. And that was the first time that it was so visible that my presence mattered, and what I said mattered, and what I knew mattered, and my network mattered, and that we kept families united. And to this day, I'm happy to say 2024, 20 years later, that law still is in place, as in other states. And so learning that power, I wanted to make sure that other women and other people learn that same power.
Wow. Wow, what a wonderful story. It was like your political show moment where it's like, oh my God, the stakes are high. And how fortunate that you were in that room
Yeah.
to advocate for our communities. Um, can you tell me a little bit about what you learned about leadership that maybe you hadn't thought about before in the writing of this book or in the interviews that you did? And you said a lot of the conversations ended in tears. And I know you talked a little bit about some of the challenges that women face in leadership, right? Whether it's imposter syndrome or the feeling of having to apologize or second guess themselves. But what is maybe something that you weren't expecting to learn about leadership in the writing of the book?
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you mentioned and noted the piece of the imposter syndrome, because that was high at the top. And for, across the line. And so being able to really, this book being el rebozo, of wrapping around and serving as a compass of here's my 10 lessons. What are yours? And reading 50 different women's lessons and you creating your own, using it again as a compass, as a rebozo, to wrap it around what yours could be. One of the things that I thought was pretty powerful and beautiful, and a freaking reminder to myself. In fact, I'll tell you a story in a second. But it was the asking for help. So many people look up to the people like, "Oh, you're so strong. You must be able to handle everything." That's not the case. Sometimes I need a café con leche, or something, that will make me warm and happy and just calm my nerves down. But I remember one evening, in fact, it was when I was moving from DC to Texas. And one of the people in the book was a dear friend of mine, Gabby Pacheco. I was crying. I was upset. I didn't know how I was going to move my life across the country and so fast, and launching the book. And another friend of mine was sick and was about to pass away. And she was like, "Mujer, open to page." And she said the page. And what does number 4 say? And I was like, "What?" She's like, "Open the book now. Your book that you wrote." And I was like, "Okay, fine." I opened it, and it was like, "Ask for help." And she was like, "What do you need?" And thanks to her help, I was able to hire a virtual assistant who helped me launch the book and know how to do all the graphics on Canvas. I don't even know how to do that. And it was a huge reminder of putting my own action, or putting into action some of my own lessons, but also what many of the women said, asking for help. And that was various age groups, is asking for help. And so those of you listening, please ask for help. I'm happy to, I don't know many of you. I don't know if I'll ever meet some of y'all in person, although I'm in LA next week. But feel free to text me, 202-596-2434.
It's very interesting because I find a lot of the women in our Hope office, and a lot of the women that we train are either like first daughters or only daughters, and it's always difficult when you're the one who's carrying a lot of the burden of the responsibility to be like, hey, I might need some help, or I might need to tap someone else in. So
Well, Diana, can I say something to that too?
Yeah.
Because I am the middle of 5 daughters, but I am the one that seems to sometimes be like the
The
peacemaker.
responsible child.
But it's also okay to say no. That's many of the women in the book said that. And learning how to say no, I have to say, was one of the hardest things for me. And I've only learned to do that recently. And the more we practice it and model it, then I show my nieces and nephews that, yeah, I don't have to say yes to every family event that we have every week, or to anything that doesn't align with, my mental health and other priorities in my life, that we can work something out. So saying no is also just as much as the help importance.
Yeah. So I know you're going to talk a little bit about some of the trends that you saw in the book. One of the ones I noticed, I don't know if it stuck out to you, but it was about having your own finances in order. So planning, financial planning, and making sure you were taking care of the home financially. But are there any trends that you kind of noticed in the different advice that was coming in?
Yeah, I have in the end of the book of like, what are the top 10 most common. And then I think the first 5 are like very telling. And I think it's also important to note, again, these are 3 different generations, 25 states. And I said a second ago, is the believing in yourself piece, like si se puede, Dolores Huerta's famous line, and the self-care piece. So when you have those things going on, you will be responsible in other areas of your life, like your finances, so that you won't have to stress out on things. Again, learning what that looks like, and then modeling that for your own families or those around you. Another one that you probably won't be surprised about is being a mentor and serving as a mentor. And when I say that, it's like one line: being a mentor and having a mentor. And then being an active listener. If we're not actively listening, we're not learning how to be better with our finances, to be better with our health, to be better about asking for help. So that's things I have learned, and I am single, and I don't have my own children. I am the best tia in the whole wide world, but it's, learning from, people like Gloria Molina of giving me some relationship advice, and listening on, like, I can be a leader and try and juggle some of this, because we're under so much scrutiny. And then the 5th one of the 10 most common was being that lifelong learner, and embracing any kind of change. I think we all know and must be reminded that change is good. And to be comfortable with being uncomfortable during change is when we're going to grow the most. But it's those kind of things that came to be most common. And the one right after that was surrounding ourselves with people that we want to network, that we want to be like. You want to have that kitchen cabinet, because if you don't, I've seen in my own, and yes, I'm in therapy. My therapist has, reminded me that it's important to have my friends and my work, circles, and making sure that I'm keeping myself whole in all that spaces. But yeah, they'll be your cheerleaders, and they'll be the ones to tell you what you need to hear and not what you want to hear. And that's always important.
Yeah, I love that. I think one of the most difficult things when we talk about this kitchen cabinet for young people, we also have a college leadership training program. It's like, how do you go about asking someone to be your mentor? Any advice that you might have on that?
Yes, I get that question a lot, especially when I talk about that part of the book. And I simply say it's you just ask. I know when people reach out to me, I'll be honest and say right away, look, my time is limited. So if it's a weekend or an evening, so I would say in the advice is, when you do that bold ask, because many times there'll be an audience, and I'll give my cell phone number out like I did a few seconds ago, and I'll probably, out of maybe 100 or some, like only one or two text, which is fine. But it goes to show, like, some people will do that and some won't take the offer. But what I would say, my biggest piece of advice is, especially if you're starting off with adopting a mentor, is to say, what time of the day works best for you. And if that person says, Thursday evenings, if they say 20 minutes, then be respectful of that 20 minutes. Have your questions ready in those 20 minutes, because that gift of time that they're investing in you is important. And as when you are being the mentee, to be respectful of that time. As Helen said, that purpose with time is important and powerful. And when you maximize it, like one of my mentors, he was I'm Catholic and he's Methodist. And so when he said a certain time, I had my questions ready, and it was like to the dot. And he's like, I just want to say real quick, thank you for doing that. He's like, makes me want to meet with you more. But yeah, I would say that from the front is be respectful of their time, because probably will be limited.
Yeah, I find that a lot of the motivation for women to be mentors is um that they had it hard, that they were often the first of something, and if they can be that helping hand to make it easier for the next generation, then they'll do what they can. So I love that you said, but you got to be prepared.
Yes.
Yeah, you got to be prepared. You talk about in the book, and I know it's something I resonated with very much, but also Hope as an organization. You talk about the need to prepare ourselves for leadership because the country is changing. It's going to look more like us.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about whether you saw that Latinos are very community oriented, natural collaborators. You also mentioned in the book, good listeners, women in particular. Um, but can you talk a little bit about what that motivation for you is to contribute to democracy? I mean, we're here, right? And I think you said this on the book as well. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. Can you talk a little
Absolutely.
bit about can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I love repeating that if we're not at the table, we're on the menu. And look, our country is in desperate and dire need of our leadership, and we got it. We just got to put it out there and flex it, and uplift what people are. Some may not be seeing. I love how you highlighted how I say in the book that women are natural collaborators, natural listeners, natural conveners. And so for us to do that in whatever workspace, whether that's in politics, whether that's on campuses, whether that's in operating rooms, to boardrooms, you know, that is, and it might sound minute, but it's not. And so making sure that when it is done, that we write a book about it, or that we do a podcast about it, or that we honor it somehow, some way, so that we're growing other leaders. Look, in 39 days, well, I don't know, this will be recorded, yes. So we have an election coming up, and probably, every election, like, oh, this is the most decisive, but I believe this one is, because democracy is on the line. Um, I remember when my grandfather he would dress up as if he was going to church. It was like an honored duty, and he would take us to go when he would go vote. And I'll always remember that. And so when I started voting, I would take my nieces and nephews, and so like it's now a way of life. Now that that's in danger, um, especially for us women, policies about our own health. My goodness, if we're not taking part in this, we have no right to complain. And so, whatever our gift is, again, it doesn't have to be politics. If it is, I hope it is. But if it's not, whatever that respective industry is, that we show up at our best, to show, one, that we exist, and two, to grow other leadership. That's if there's anything in the book, it is that I wish people could take away from it, and to use it as a tool to create their own list of lessons using some of the other lessons.
I love that. And what a moment in history that potentially the president of this country and the president of Mexico will both be women, and it'll be, a case study on women's leadership and is it different? Is it better? What are all the questions that are kind of out there? Will be very interesting if that does happen.
And I
All
say, of
right.
course, it'll be better. Checking. It will.
All right, I'm gonna ask you a question that's probably, and I think you mentioned it a little bit, but I'd love to know, is there something you left out in the book? Is there a second edition? What would you wanted to add? What does that look like for you?
Yeah. Well, I definitely would have wanted to add more women, that's for sure. And as far, but continuing that in other forms is what I'm excited about. And like I said, the creating more leaders like y'all are doing at Hope is important. And so I think being really specific with, and I mentioned this when I was with y'all in March in LA, is that executive coaching. You know, it's like me on my diet, losing weight. I have a trainer right now, and if I don't go see her every Tuesday and Thursday, I fall off my rocker. And so being able to be consistent about my goals, executive coaching, I think, is a direction that I want to make sure that our Latina leaders are doing, in addition to leadership training, in addition to what have you. Because for me, when I was doing leadership training, it was always in a group setting. And so when I got an executive coach, I was able to create a strategic plan for myself for 24 months. And I've done that 3 times, and and one of the last time was I want to write a book. And so I can probably say that each of the last two-year terms that I did for myself, I executed about 80% of my own plan. And so knowing that, and I just shared with you earlier that we Latinas have this natural emotional intelligence, that when we unlock that and we unleash that power of, like, oh my gosh, you are lighting up the country. And again, now more than ever, our country needs this, our world needs this. And so if there's anything that I know I would like to contribute in continuing this book, is through the executive coaching. So again, using the book as a tool to do that, whether it be, if someone's considering running for office, or being a staffer for a member of Congress, or what have you, like, what does that look like? And creating that with you. So yes, we've been doing groups, but individual as well. But that is something that I wish I could have included earlier in the book, and saying that up front, but I didn't know what was possible until now. So as far as second edition, it was a lot to write the first one. So I think, really trying to hone in on the, which, by the way, I love Hope. And so I would like to offer Hope members, whoever the first 5 are, to reach out to me. I will give 5 first free sessions for email, that Diana can give my email, or my cell phone, text me, or my website, deliagarcia.us. My cell phone, 202-596-2434, because I know that the power that has, and seeing some of the people that I look up to that have executive coaches has been a game changer.
Yeah, I love that. I think one of the more difficult things about leadership is, like, is I mean, you also mentioned this in the book, you can't be what you can't see. And so having that guidance, I think, is really helpful in the book. I think it's a beautiful kind of written word of some guidance. I know that was one of the goals you had with this book, is that it not just serves as a symbol, or a history of amazing leaders, but that it also is a guide to future generations about what they can achieve, which is really cool. All right, I'm gonna ask you to share maybe another excerpt from the book that maybe means a lot to you, if you have that ready.
Yes, I do. I have a confession. Well, hopefully my publisher's not listening to this. It's okay, because I really wanted to name this book, like, have it the word chingona, but they're like, no, because it's going to be in some schools, which, by the way, it is in Texas school districts. And so clearly we couldn't have the word and on top of the front of the book. So I do like to honor my number 1 top 10 lesson, which is number 1. And then it really culminates the rest of the 9 of my list, which is like the last page of the book. And that is to be chingona, take risk, learn to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, and embrace change. Because at times when I have done that, I have shaky voice, but it has been a beautiful moment later on in life. And I shared the story with you about my first time on the house floor in that March of 2005. I was scared like no other. And to then later on that evening, it was in the middle of the night. So when I got to my car, I put on some loud music of Selena And then Ramon Ayala came on afterwards, and I just cried alone in my car.
Yeah.
And it was those moments like I was really proud of that moment. And I want others to feel that way and empowered. And again, like other people's stories and lessons serve as like your compass and the rebozo around you.
I love this imagery of the rebozo around you. And I love that you said you have to get used to or comfortable with being uncomfortable because that's often where growth is, right?
Yes.
That's often where growth is. Another piece in the intro that you liked, and I'm focusing on the intro because that's more so the piece that you that's it's your voice.
Yes.
You talk about power posing, and I love that because sometimes I need to power pose, and I've been doing, the same kind of programming for quite some time, but sometimes I'm like, oh, I need a little confident boosting. Uh, uh, so I'll do a power pose. Any other tricks that you maybe have around kind of overcoming some of those challenges? Like you also mentioned that Latinas and that women tend to be self-deprecating.
Yeah.
Um, any other tools or tricks that you use for yourself? Like what did like ramping up, obviously you asked for help from Marisol at Maldef, but like any other, moments that you feel like this is gonna boost my confidence.
Yeah. And I know this sounds crazy, but bra and shoes. I remember one of my colleagues, in Kansas in 2004, there were 27 of us out of 125. And of course, I was the only Latina. And one of my mentors, you know, um, she was built like me. And she was like, girlfriend, and I love how blunt she was. She was like, there's two things we should spend money on in life, especially when you're in front of the public eye a lot. And she was like, and that's a bra and good shoes. And she was like, you don't want anything unpresentable so that people can pay attention to what you're saying. And so, yeah, I started spending good money on good bras so that I could feel confident. My posture was good. And so when I began doing trainings for women who were interested in running for office, I would always include that example. Someone asked, where you get yours? Well, Lane Bryant had good ones. But, if I found another place, I like to support small business. So I always start doing that as well. But, I was also told early on, to be considered serious, make sure you wear dark colors. And that rubbed me the wrong way, clearly, what I'm wearing right now. So what I did was I created my own style. Pearls always, I like that power jewelry, but also color with like a black cami. So I was able to still be serious with the power color, light makeup, not wearing glasses when you're in front of the TV stations because of the glare. And then also that's what people subconsciously consider seriousness because they can see your eye contact. It's all of that I learned in media training thanks to organizations like NALEO, the National Association of Latino Elected Officials, that have us go through training, a boot camp right when we get elected, and putting those things to use. And then when I learned it, I wanted to make sure the women that I trained learned the same thing, as well as what a lot of us, like I'm doing right now. It's natural that we talk with our hands, which is why it's important to get your have your nails clean at least. But when you're standing there, to pretend you're holding a softball in your hand, so that way it doesn't look any kind of nervousness, and that's power pose. And it's right your tummy, your belly button, so you're still looking power, and you're standing with your feet on the ground. But it's those kind of things that I've learned from great mentors and training that I want to make sure that I'm sharing the love and knowledge with other women so that they can tap into their chingonanes and badassery, and just focus on that rather than, okay, I need to make sure I look like this. And unfortunately we have to do that extraness to makeup where some men don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
And some women don't have to, but I have my eyeliner tattooed, saving money and time.
I love that. I love that. I've seen like AOC does like her hoops. Everyone has this like one thing that's gonna one boost your confidence. And I love that for a lot of Latinas
Signature.
actually it's cultural sometimes too, like the hoops or your red. I don't know. For
Yes.
me, red is cultural. Just vibrant colors. I love that. Anything that you want to kind of close this conversation with, Delia?
Well, first and foremost, thank you. And if there's any questions that individuals may have, reach out to me. But I really want to say that the book is a tool to serve as a compass for you to write your own lessons, whatever that may be. And reading some of them and getting an idea. I would never say, even though it's my book, I would never say read the whole book in one sitting. I love that my mother's when she read the book, she's like, I read Two Women a Night, and she was able to like debrief with me each time. I love talking to my mother every week too. But I think going through some of the names and seeing like which backgrounds resonate with you, or just blindly looking. But again, using it as a compass for yourself and as a rebozo for yourself. If I can impact one person, then it will have served its purpose in writing the book.
I love that. Okay, we have one question here from Daisy, and she wants to know, how can we strategically plan for like a 24-year term, like individually, I think is what she's saying. So what does that process of like strategic planning for 2 years look like for you? So you talked about executive coaching. Oh, who can we plan with?
Strategically plan with this. So I can suggest my coach. She's out of Chicago. I'm sure there's other women in California maybe, but I know her, Janet Padilla, and we actually do some of the trainings together using my book. And we only started in Illinois, so we'd like to go to other states, but because she's there is where we started. And I invite you to join our first one that's coming up in March, Women's History Month in 2025. But she's tailoring it because she's also trying something new, because she used to work, or she currently works for Ford Foundation, and does some of that similar work. But that's actually something new. But we've been doing that, like I said, for 3 different times. And each person, it's individually. It's 3 sessions of 90 minutes. And then, letting some time pass because you have some own homework to do. But I have literally on my board right now, because it's a 24-month plan, so I have it lit up so that way when I'm here at work, I can see it every day. I'm like, oh, I haven't done that. But it reminds me, okay, I have to do this with the book. I have to do this with executive coaching. I have to, believe it or not, I have dating on there because I have not done that for 13 years. So that's also been new. But, it's fun. And so each individual's plan is different. I highly recommend it. And again, I'm happy to give you more information.
All right. Any other questions from the audience before we say thank you and goodbye? I dropped Delia's website on here. You all should check it out. She has some of the information around the coaching on there as well. I wanted to say thank you for, I think often when we think about leadership, we think about older generations and kind of wisdom being passed down, but I really enjoyed some of the stories of the young women that you interviewed. And in the introduction, you talk about DACA and Dreamers and the leadership lessons that came out of that movement for so many of us, right? Who that is not our experience. And so thank you for highlighting that as well.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned that. Like I said, there's various backgrounds. And so when people have said like who all is in the book, we have from dreamers to farm workers to dreamer moms who are doing organizing, who are putting their lives on the line and their citizenship status. They're seeing their lessons and combining it with whatever your industry is. Like, my goodness, like a lot of it resonates. It's pretty much the same. So it's really the style we do it is what's different. Literally the Latina style.
Wow. I love that. All right, Delia. Well, thank you so much for being with us this hour and for closing up our 2024 Hope Hour. I think you left us with a really beautiful and inspiring conversation around leadership, which is just our wheelhouse. I will say, I know you talked a little bit about politics. I always have to give this disclaimer. Hope is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. We do not endorse any candidates. We do encourage all of you to turn out to vote in November, wherever you are. But thank you so much, Delia.
Thank you. And thank you for all you do.
All right. Talk soon.
You too. Bye-bye.